Good morning to everybody. I'm going to speak about the origins of the Syriac-speaking church in Ja-cob of Serugh family according to the manuscript Vatican Syriac 118. My paper is divided into three parts. The first part will be on the witnesses of the early presence of Syriac-speaking Christian communities. The second part, allusions to the origins of the Syriac-speaking church and the Memre attributed to Ja-cob of Serugh in Vatican Syriac 118. Well, I will be talking about the Memre on the star which appeared to the Magi, and on the Memre of the name of Emmanuel. And the third part is a conclusion, a question. Is there any Jewish matrix at all for Ja-cob of Serugh in these Memre? Okay, I will go to the first part. Witnesses to the early presence of Syriac-speaking Christian communities. Nothing is certain about the origins of the Syriac-speaking Christians. Well, that's not very encouraging. We do not know who their first evangelizers were. However, the epitaph of Archbishop of Hierapolis region in the 2nd century Anno Domini attests to their presence. Thus we read, I have seen a people there having splendid zeal, and I have seen the land of Syria and all the cities of Nisibis, and having crossed the Euphrates, I had brethren. The inscription dates from the end of the 2nd century. The foundation of these communities then must have occurred sometime earlier, at the least early 2nd century. Well, aside from the translation of the Holy Scriptures into Syriac, other Syriac writings ascertain the presence of flourishing Christian communities in the Syro-Mesopotamian area in the first 2 centuries. For example, the Odes of Solomon, a collection of stamps dated from the end of the 1st century to the beginning of the 2nd century Anno Domini, testify to the early presence of Syriac-speaking communities in the area. Christianity is further witnessed in the second half of the 2nd century by 2 important Syriac writers, Tatian, who was coming born circa 125 and died circa 185, who composed the Harmony Gospel of the Ephesaron, and Baptizan, born in 154 and died 222, who wrote the Book of the Lost of Countries, a dialogue on faith. The New Testament attests that before Jesus' ascension into heaven, he sent his apostles to preach the good news to the whole world, beginning from Jerusalem, as we read in Matthew 28, verses 19 to 20, and Acts chapter 1, verse 8. In the Acts, we read that in Antioch, the followers of Christ were made for the first time Christians. That is in Acts chapter 11, verse 26. However, no mention is made of the disciples advancing further into Mesopotamia, although it is possible that some did actually go as far as the Persian Empire, thanks to the leading high roads of the Silk Route. Aside from the traveling merchants who brought the knowledge of the gospel along the high roads, persecutions after the death of Stephen about 37 Anno Domini occasioned the flight of the believers outside Palestine. Then, the fall of Jerusalem at 70 Anno Domini urged the fleeing Jews to head eastward, and among them must also be Jewish Christians. Unfortunately, there is no extant witness to this early period. All we have are traditions claiming apostolicity for Syriac Christianity. However, although these traditions can be categorized as legend, they must contain a kernel of truth. The Church of the East, for example, treasures the memory of the Magi, known to be of Persian origin. Beetle, Ikakovsky, which are the painting we just talked about, told about the tradition of the Magi in the Syriac-speaking church in a study dedicated to Sebastian Brock in 2008. He said that there are 2 strands of tradition. First, that of speaking of 12 Magi, and second, that of 3 Magi. However, Ja-cob of the essay in the 7th century and alone seem to know of a written with of 1,000 men arriving from the east. Eusebius' ecclesiastical history recounts the sending of the Apostle Abba and the Apostle Thomas as promised by the Lord, himself. As Christoph Barber says, the names of the Apostle Thomas, Abdai, Akka, and Mani ought to be taken in consideration, especially since they occupy the first 4 places in the official chronology of the patriarchs of the Church of the East. The evangelization of this Mesopotamian area has been assigned to Abdai. His successor in the See of Edessa is his disciple Abdai. The other disciple and successor on the Christian Portia is Memre, according to tradition. India was assigned to the Apostle Thomas. Although there is no sufficient evidence for an apostolic mission in India, considerable evidence shows that diplomatic relations and maritime trade existed between the Roman Empire and the west coast of India, thus opening the possibility of an early penetration of the Christian message through travelers and merchants. Now I come to the second part of my paper. We would like to know whether the early Syriac scholars, up to the division of the Syriac-speaking church after Chalcedon, did speak about its origin in their writings. And since I had a chance to study manuscript containing the Memre attributed to Ja-cob of Serugh, the Vatican Syriac 118, I would like to speak to you about the 2 Memre contained therein, where I have found some hints regarding the origins of the Syriac-speaking church. As I said, the Memre of the star which appeared to the Magi in the slaughter of the infants, and the Memre of the name of Emmanuel. The style and vocabulary of these Memre indicate the hand of only one author for both Memre, and the author is unmistakably Persian. Okay, I showed you the Memre of the star which appeared to the Magi and on the slaughter of infants. This is contained in Vatican Syriac 118, folio 46 to folio 56, and corresponds to the first volume of Benjamin, pages 84 to 152. Well, contrary to what has been said, that there are 2 strands of tradition on the Magi, the author of this Memre does not tell us the number of the Magi, here presented as the princes of Persia, who set forth to adorn the born king of the Jews with their gifts. Just as the star was sent as envoy to the Magi to move them to undertake the long journey to Bethlehem, so also the Magi become envoys to Herod and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Like the unknown author of the Star of the Magi of the 6th century, the author of the Memre of the Star belonged to the milieu of the Eastern Syrians who had converted to Christianity from Zoroastrianism. He must still belong to the band of those who practice Magianism. This seems obvious from the abundant reference to the art of the Chaldeans, not to mention the patriotic note in the Memre. He just knows too much, and you cannot help but think that he belongs to the group. Thus he says at the beginning of the Memre, quote from folio 42. As long as the kings of the earth do not come with their presence, this belongs to us. We are the firstborns, and we are brought near him. As long as the nations do not come to him with their gifts, we are the first ones to bring the great gift and see his face. As long as the gold in its treasures, with things made up, is not despised, this belongs to us. We advance towards him like first fruits. As long as all faraway allies do not come, our land will go to bring something and offer to him. As long as the nations do not move to come from all ends without tribute, we honor our place. Behold, from this time, as long as the multitudes do not press on each other upon his threshold, among those introduced into his house, we are the first ones. As long as he does not subdue the inhabitants of the earth in his fortifications, our band will go, fall before him like our will. End quotation. The author glories in being one of those who acknowledge the born king of the Jews lying in a manger in Bethlehem. In this manner, the author expresses that Magi, they did not learn about the stars through the prophecies of Israel, but through their own books of astrology. And he says that in their writings, they also found what Balaam said to Balak when he prophesied about him, about Balaam, through the book of Numbers, chapters 22 to 24. A star will shine forth, namely from Jacob, he announced, and the prince will arise from Israel, valiantly. Balaam is a divine, and his word is considered oracle. The Gentiles of the earth confirmed his word. In the two members of their study, Balaam is mentioned. But indeed, the importance given to Balaam in his Memre and to his prophecy is remarkable. The Memre abounds in parallelism through which the author conveys his message. The underlying theme of the entire Memre is belief. Belief comes out from preaching, from listening to good news. Envoys are sent for a purpose. The stories the envoy bringing the good news to the princes of Persia. They believe, and so they become first fruits, according to the author. In turn, they become envoys to the land of Judah, as heralds of the good tidings. Of the way they announce the rising of the king who shone forth in Judah, and as the author puts it, their ambitious craftiness urged them not to put to shame the cause for which they were ascending to Judah. They were named intelligent in all their riches. They abundantly spoke about that rising which had grown them. End of quotation. It is interesting how the author portrays the Magi, fully aware of their skillfulness, and God used their love for this skill not only to throw them towards it, but also to make preachers out of them. Well, I quote from volume 43. In every epoch, they sold good tidings until they got started. Also, while proceeding, they made the start of his being born in milestones of the way their message was spread, and in farsights these stories were told. Because of them, the regions of their pillars clamored, and the nations of the earth learned the stories with their inquiries. They cast fear upon the dwellers of the cities while narrating the nativity of the great king. Truth incited astrology to glorify itself, and in that cause it sang the song in the riches. Indeed, we have known that the king rose in the land of Judah because with our skill we have seen his rising in the zodiac signs. In order to glorify their skill and how much they knew, they increasingly told the stories of the sun in every way. The mighty one rose, letting loose at his birth their zodiac signs, and they announced it in the riches for their works. End of quotation. As he has said, they have become heralds to the riches when they crossed these bridges and at last to the land of Judah itself. And here continues volume 43. They sang the song and the ways among the Gentiles, and they reached Judah, the land that refused all the yields. Persia was stirred up with the news of the king who rose in the place, but the sons of the land swallowed with bewilderment and did not pursue him. The mother of the heathen sent dowry to the bridegroom, the king, but the bride sitting in the midst of her bedchamber did not fear him. The daughter of the Chaldeans sent gift to the Savior. The daughter of Abraham, who was in the house, did not honor him. End of quotation. And then we are called new apostles from the Gentiles by the author, sent to the Jewish people. That's what we read in the Memre. I continue. The quarters of Zion were filled with the tidings of those far away, and all the refusal of truth clamored at their words. The new apostles from the Gentiles advanced toward the people, and the message of the birth of the Son was made manifest among them. The Magi of Persia had sown new tidings in the land, and with their words they sealed the mystery of the prophecy. The presence of Magi came from the house of the Gentiles, and the interpretations of the prophecy from the midst of the people. The presence entered, the interpretations went forth, they met each other. Here and there, the birth of the king was confirmed. The Magi say, his star has seen the land that belongs to us. The scribes interpret, behold, in Bethlehem, there is his birth. It was spoken in Magi, and is evident in the prophecy. and one by one they narrated about his nativity. Light and voice were heralds of his nativity, while the prophet and the rising were proclaimers that he was the Son of God. End of quotation. However, for the author of the Memre, they are the first believers in the divine king born in the land of Judah. As we can see in the Memre of the Emmanuel, even here in the Memre of the star, he does not support any investigation of the Son's divinity. The mystery must be contemplated and honored in silence. The Magi are our examples. Their worship can even without witnessing to the marvels he would perform one day during his public ministry. So we read in Psalm 47. The Magi fell and worshipped him with wonder, without hesitation. And although they did not see as the people would, the hosts did not despise him. When he healed the sick of the people, they reckoned him insane, and prince of devils when he expelled devils from them. The sons of the Gentiles then, when they brought him their offerings, did not see the signs which he would perform, yet they worshipped him. Behold, from then on, they were like an example for the world, because whoever worships the Son of truth resembles them. End of quotation. Having worshipped the born king, they made their way back home in another way, and on the way they continued preaching about him, as we read in Psalm 51. The Magi changed the way, and they turned away from the king. And they mocked Herod because he had deceived them. Also in this passage, this of the Son was manifest, and all the ways of the entire world it was proclaimed. In one way they assembled and announced regarding the king, and when they descended again in another way, they sang his praises. With their words they have filled the earth with the new tidings. When they ascended and when they descended from near the king, they spoke about his story and the ways of the entire world. End of quotation. From this Memre then, we can gather that the Magi prepared the Syriac-speaking area to receive at the appointed time the message of Christ. Just as William M. Hogg and George Lamson say, I quote, the Magi, after returning from Bethlehem, are said to have told of the wonderful sights they had seen and heard, and to have interpreted their significance in such a manner as to prepare the Syrian mind for the reception of the gospel. End of quotation. The author of the Memre of the story comes from the same religious and cultural milieu of the Magi, and the community to which it belongs holds them as pioneers of faith. Okay, the outward Memre which I present to you is the Memre of the name of Emmanuel, contained in Vatican Syriac 108, folio 22 to 23, corresponding to the second volume of Vatican 184 to 196. Well, I have just published my study on these Memres, so I don't think that I have to deal with this in a very lengthy way, and deal with this briefly. Like the first Memre, we find hints regarding the origins of the Syriac-speaking Christianity. This is clear in the third section of the Memre, where the author declares the faith of the Church. The author holds the view that the Syriac-speaking Church traces its origin at the foot of the cross in this Memre. She, a pagan daughter of the Arameans, was present at the crucifixion. This is in line with the New Testament recording the presence of peoples of different languages, proven by the script on Jesus' head written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, as we read in John 19, verses 19 to 20. And the author says she already knew about him even before this time, and we wonder whether he is alluding to the Magi tradition. However, since the fame of Jesus spread abroad as the Gospels say, it is possible that here Jesus' public ministry alone is being referred to. Indeed, only at his death did truth dawn on the daughter of the Arameans that he is God. Here too, the Syriac church is put in contrast to the unbelieving Jews, as we read in folio number 22. The daughter of Arameans saw you at the cross, O Emmanuel. She had known about you on account of the wonders of your mighty deeds. Zeal blinded the daughter of the Jews, and she did not know you. And because she hated you, the armies who were there did not disturb her. The church of the nations, daughter of the day of the beloved, at the crucifixion knew you, my Lord, that you are God. End of quotation. Since Jesus was condemned to death during the Paschal celebration of the Jews and Jewish festivals drew pilgrims and spectators to the holy city until today, it is not impossible that visitors from Mesopotamia were indeed present at the crucifixion. For the author, the Syriac-speaking church, descended from this group. She saw you, as it is written. Here the church is presented as daughter and bride of Christ. She is born from the side of Christ, and she is betrothed to the crucified Savior. The divinity of the Son is spoken in terms of riches, and the poverty of his humanity concealed it. Yet, the church saw through this veil and chose to follow him, not the Syriac church. Ja-cob, still from volume 22. Emmanuel came, he betrothed me at his crucifixion, and I know who he is, the Son of the one who will not be dishonored. Like a poor, he came to our place when you betrothed me. But I knew that he had riches, and I went forth with him. Then she goes on. I hated my parents because of him, for I love him. Fire and sword went forth against me, but they did not terrify me. I rendered him good returns for how they loved me. He bore the insults and reproaches in my stead while saving me. In order to pay my debts, he raised a pillar in the midst of the tribunal, and with which he was scourged. How I praise him! Because of him, I forgot my parents, for I loved him, and I treated with contempt the images and all the idols of nothingness and of creation. At this point, we ask whether the author is still speaking of the riches of the Syriac-speaking church, or his own personal story of conversion from paganism to faith in Christ. One thing can be sure now is that the church to which he belongs is of pagan and not of Jewish origins. Now, it is always believed that Christianity is a result of the preaching of Jewish Christians. The apostles were Jews, and the first converts were Jews, and only later the pagans began pouring in. The author of the Memre of the Emmanuel does not share this view. Furthermore, in this Memre, there is no suggestion that the doctrine of the Jews did come to believe in the crucified. They are the unbelieving people, unlike the daughter of the Arameans, who came to believe, although not the privileged beneficiary of God's promises in the past. From the way Jews and Gentiles are juxtaposed in these two Memre, it becomes clear that the author's relationship with the Jews was far from being smooth. Tensions are present in both Memre, and the author points out that the belief of Jews while the believing Gentiles are praised. However, in the Memre of the Emmanuel, we find out that the author does not reproach the unbelieving Jews only, but the learned Christians puffed up with their knowledge as well, and they are called Jews by the author. While the adversary of the Memre of the Star seems to be the Jewish people, in the Memre of the Emmanuel, the adversaries are the author's contemporaries who search out the Son. The community to which the author belongs, therefore, does not hold in its memory and the Jewish ministry and its origins. This Christian community in the Persian Empire owes its faith to those Persians present at the crucifixion who came to believe in the one crucified, the Son of God. So I come to the conclusion. Is there any Jewish matrix? According to these two Memre. In my doctoral dissertation, I have written that it is generally accepted that the Jewish features of the Syriac-speaking church is due to its Jewish foundation. I was greatly influenced by Ja-cob. Well, he affirms that the liturgical area is decisive in developing the Jewish roots of the Syriac-speaking church. Above all, because of its communal character and because rituals are characterized by certain stability and they are not easily changed. For example, there being one collections up to the 4th century and their interpretation of the Paschal mystery in the Jewish name, that is, an emphasis on the passion of death rather than on his resurrection, can be attributed only to their holding of the Jewish traditions. Hollister could imagine only two plausible explanations for the existence of the Jewish liturgical elements in early Syriac Christianity. First, the Syriac traditions they had received from the first missionaries. Second, they were more acquainted and familiar with Jewish liturgical traditions than those living in other areas. Therefore, it is very likely that the earliest Syriac-speaking church was comprised of a considerable number of Jewish descendants. And it is unliturgical rites that loopholes are used against the view holding a purely Gentile origin for the Syriac church. For it is indeed, according to him, I quote, difficult to explain why these communities that heard for such a long time to ritual practices that were clearly of Jewish origin and elsewhere abolished or fell into oblivion. Conservatism and isolation from the rest of the Christian world alone hardly make Memre. End of quotation. Now, as far as the two Memre understand are concerned, what we can say is, even if Jewish influence is evident above all on the liturgical plane, this does not necessarily point to Jewish origins in the Syriac Christian communities, which are often wrong. For practices handed to them since the beginning, such as there being blood collection and all the stress of the Paschal sacrifice, rather than on resurrection, may well have been an attempt at Christianization to counter their neighbor Jews' celebrations. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sister Nora. It was very interesting. This point on Ja-cob and Serugh at all, that is pertaining to the identity of Syrian Church.
Exactly.
Is there any question? We have not a lot of time, but perhaps for one question.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the presentation. My question was, you said that people, opponents, or people who are being criticized are born Jewish, even if they are not Jews. Am I right?
Can I understand the question?
I think you said towards the end that
The second Memre or the first Memre?
the last one.
Okay, the Emmanuel. Yeah.
That there was a criticism against Christians,
Yeah.
and they were called Jews,
Yeah, exactly.
even if they were not Jews.
Yeah. It didn't appear right away in this Memre. I had to understand why Jews are being reproached in this way. And then I read it over again, and I realized that he isn't actually against the Jews as Jewish people, but this reproach is addressed to his contemporaries, because it is from the way he wrote the accusation that I understood that it was not the Jewish people at all.
When you say contemporaries, Christian contemporaries.
Yeah, exactly. Within the community, I believe that it is within this community. And just imagine that if we take a state of Serugh, for example, one will live at the top of the division of the church into two, Eastern and Western. So I think this author has seen so much, experienced too much, this division, and he's trying to tell his contemporaries that perhaps it is better just to contemplate the mystery of the divinity of the Son than always traveling over this stuff. Yeah, there is another thing.
I just wanted to bring your attention to this. Church is that it's an extended book. I think the original is in Syriac. The Malayalam translation was made by Reverend Syriac-speaking. was put by Macabasag in 1924. And it's available in bookshops where the number of major artists mentioned as 12, specifically, and their names are given. And it also adds that they came accompanied about 35,000 soldiers. And that after wrestling the mother and baby, all their parts were they begged of the mother some gift for them to take back. And the Blessed Virgin Mary gave them one of baby Jesus' swaddling cloths. And then they took it back.
I know that story, yeah.
Yes.
One of the babies story,
And they divided it into 12.
They become 12 and then they become multiplied.
That is very
That's great, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Un esempio of all that is done here for Syriac studies.
My first question was actually just asked by the mental aid. Thank you. The second question was, thank you, Mrs. Nora, for a wonderful presentation. Really well researched. The question I had for you, what I found really interesting was the part about the zodiac signs. Was that you mentioned a few quotations which mentioned astrology or astronomy.
Yeah.
And so I just had a question about that. I found it very interesting. You mentioned one line that says, "You have seen his rising in the zodiac signs." Now, was that from the first Memre?
From the first Memre at the start, yeah. It is very long. It is really very, very long. 72 pages in the Benjamin's edition, more than 70 pages. And that is the reason why I said that you can only be a Persian and one of the major of the member of the major is because it really talks about it for a very, very long time. The pages of he knew too much. So he could only be one of them. Okay, one of those studying astrology and all of those things. There are many words which I didn't know. I had to study what I had to understand what they were. Yeah. Persian. Perfectly Persian.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that coming to the
Okay, sure.